Welcome back, everyone, to Visceral Reactions. I'm Matthew Germanis.
Bloomin' wolves chasing me through blue inferno.
And this is Quinn Williams. We've decided to do things a little bit more classical, but not in the way that you might think. We will be discussing Francis Ford Coppola's Bram Stoker's Dracula, which is always fun to say.
Mm-hmm.
And
Try saying it 5 times fast.
I'll leave that up to you.
Francis Ford Coppola, Dracula, Francis Ford Coppola, Dracula, blah, 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 blah.
And Frank Henenlotter's Frankenhooker, which you might see we are doing Dracula and Frankenstein, 2 adaptations that might not be the first that come to mind, but are 2 of the best and could very easily be argued as being the 2 best of their respective monsters.
And weirdly enough, more similar than you might think.
Yeah.
In regards to certain themes and what is presented.
Absolutely. To start, we're going to go with Dracula. Because...
Where do we even start?
Well, the thing that you can start with pretty much all of Coppola's films, and it's that all of his work is about Hollywood itself. The art of making movies. It's more importantly, it's about making art in the industry of making movies. And the way that this shows up in his very, very lush adaptation of Bram Stoker's novel is that the film is looking at the era in which film began and is taking this classic monster and showing how he has changed, not just over the ages, but how Dracula has changed film history as well.
Which is interesting because Dracula, it may not be the first one. It may not have been the 10th. But regardless, Bela Lugosi Dracula was one of the first talkie films. Because sound and films really came out in the 1930s, which is around when Bela Lugosi Dracula came out.
Exactly. To think that Dracula, Todd Browning's Dracula coming out in 1931, just 4 years after The Jazz Singer comes out, like this is still a relatively new thing. And to have this presence, like to have someone with the same exoticism of Valentino, more, I mean, obviously more dangerous, but still like to have this character on screen who's so seductive and so foreign at the beginning of the era in which people can hear someone speak on film, and to have such a thick accent is really, it's wonderful. And so you have Coppola taking the history of not just Dracula, the character, what Dracula inspired, like Nosferatu, which is all over this film, visually and verbally. Nosferatu is used as a almost interchangeable word for vampire whenever Van Helsing brings him up. To get back to the original idea of Bram Stoker's Dracula being a film about film, there's actually there are a few lines in the novel that I would like to bring up. Okay, so this is the end of chapter 3 of Bram Stoker's Dracula. And this is Jonathan Harker, quote, "And yet, unless my senses deceive me, the old centuries had, and have, powers of their own, which mere modernity cannot kill," end quote. I mention that because Coppola is making this film in the very early 90s. The film comes out in 1992.
A year before Jurassic Park, which is interesting, and it's very important.
Yes.
Because there is not a single bit of special effects used by computers. CGI.
Exactly.
There's no CGI. It's all
on camera.
In camera.
Yeah.
Which is
which is unbelievable.
Baffling. I don't know how they did some of the things that they did.
Well, the answers to that is if you're a Coppola and you need something done,
you get your son to do it.
You get your son. You get a family member. If their last name is Coppola, or at one point their last name was Coppola, you hire them, and you're going to get the best damn work you possibly can.
What you're going to do first is you're going to hire a bunch of chunky team of special effects to be like, Mr. Coppola, we can't do this without special. We can't do this without a computer. And he's like, get out, you're fired.
Yeah. Coppola fires a great number of people in his design team, including Dante Ferretti, who is a multiple Oscar winner who frequently works with some of the greatest names in film history over the past half a century. And Coppola fires him because the sets were getting too expensive. The film ended up costing about $40 million to make, and who knows how much more it would have cost if
it was sets very over budget, which he did not want because of the poor reception of Godfather Part 3.
Yeah, like this film at one point was going to be a straight to cable production, and instead
they would have to cut so much.
Oh my God, yeah,
this would have been a 30-minute film.
Yep. And so instead, what we get is the incredibly talented team of Coppola simply directing and producing, not writing, which is rare. James Hart.
Yes, who went to go and write Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, interestingly enough.
And James Hart had been trying to get this film done for at least a decade. I believe as late or as early as the late 70s, he'd been wanting to do something vampiric with the popularity of things such as like Salem's Lot.
Even Christopher Lee's Dracula and the Hammer horror films.
Yeah, like the vampires were having a moment.
Yep.
And so James Hart wanted to do this. And so what you get is this script, and you get people like Thomas Anders doing the production design. You get Greg Canham doing the unbelievable Oscar-winning makeup for Gary Oldman, just transforming him. I have it written down.
That or seconds,
so brief, so brief,
seconds.
And yet they are transformations that I have not seen since, and definitely have not seen as realistic.
Kind of get them in the Underworld films.
Yeah, that's like which had to have been inspired. Where the sets are pretty sparse.
You must point out, it's all done in studios. Yeah. There is no on location. It's all done using sets. Every single bit, except for one, which I do not remember. But besides that, 99% of this film is on a sound stage.
Yeah, and it adds
to. If you would have told me that, I wouldn't have believed it.
Yeah, no, because everything looks too grand.
But that being said, it almost, in a way, almost at certain points, like the Asylum, can tell like, oh, this is a big set, but you don't care.
Yeah.
Because it's like, this movie is a film, but it feels a lot more like a play.
It does.
With the sets, with the grandiose costume design.
Yeah.
With your eyes on camera visual effects, it's like a play.
Yeah. Between double exposure and
so many
trick
projections.
Photography, reverse photography.
Oh, I can't wait to talk about a certain scene using reverse footage.
Like, between all of these tricks, Coppola went back to the very beginning of filmmaking to make this work. So, for example, in the beginning, when Jonathan Harker's played by Keanu Reeves, of course.
We'll talk about that.
When he's in the carriage on the way to Castle Dracula, and the carriage is speeding up and speeding up and speeding up to get there before sunsets. Those horses are not running in a straight line. They're just running in a giant circle, and it's making them look like they are endlessly racing around a mountain. So just like moments like that, Coppola pulls out all of the elementals, or the fundamentals, excuse me, to make something without that much money and without that much space, work in a way that nothing ever has. So in the beginning, since I saw this as a child, the thing that has stood out the most to me has been the prologue, the history of Vlad the Impaler, that no other Dracula movie to that point, to my knowledge, had addressed the relationship between Vlad and Dracula. And you get Vlad the Impaler, you get Gary Oldman with this long, rich hair and this armor that looks like muscle without the skin. And this giant battle scene that really isn't giant, because most of it,
they use
puppets.
Yeah.
Most
like
of it,
shadow play.
It's puppetry.
And you see the same thing happen later on in the film when they're at the almost like the welcome to the tent of history of film, even though film has been around for 2 months at this point.
Yeah. You're getting puppetry. You're getting what would be used, on a stage or in a very early silent film. And that alone, especially with how rich the costumes are throughout the film, designed by Aiko Ishioka, Oscar-winning costume design. Coppola told Ishioka that the costumes were the sets.
Go crazy with them.
Yeah, that the costumes are telling so much of the story and so much of the character that you, especially with Gary Oldman, we are seeing him transform so many times throughout the film.
It's like almost 10 times.
So Dracula takes 9 different forms. Now, not all of these need to be costumed, because
some of them look a bit similar to others.
Also, one of those forms happens to be a pile of rats.
I forgot about that.
But the point is that he either has his large crimson robe in the beginning when Jonathan Harker arrives to his castle.
With his penis hair.
Or by the time he gets to London later in the film and he has this very sharp light gray suit. Or at the end when he's wearing, right before Mina kills him, and he's wearing this Klimt-inspired robe that's
almost
just
like
glistening.
A priest robe.
Yeah, a priest in a very unholy temple. You have all of these techniques being used to remind you that even though it's 1992, even though next year, unbeknownst to the public, Jurassic Park was going to come out and completely change the way that films are made. Whether they're big budget or not, Hollywood, in the same way that Hollywood was changed when Star Wars came out, when Jaws came out, when The Godfather came out, it changes. And here's a film that's just as grand.
Probably the last of its kind.
It's, in a way, it is. And just like that line from Dracula about there are things that modernity cannot kill, there are techniques that literally 100 years later, Coppola is using that not only work, but they stand up better than most films using CGI from that time, some even from a few years ago, do to this day. The same reason that the reason why Jurassic Park holds up so well is because of how much animatronic effects were used. You have this statement of sorts that the film is reminding you that the techniques, when it comes to filmmaking, when it comes to artistry, there are certain techniques that are never going to die. There are certain modes of storytelling that looking at, the epistolary tradition, that the way that the novel of Dracula, just like the novel of Frankenstein, is told through a series of letters, having the film's narration told through letters carries on that tradition. People still to this day write letters. Like they're just certain forms of communication and of storytelling that no matter what medium they go through, no matter what they're filtered through, the essence is still there. We get a Dracula that is indebted to more than just filmmaking as an art, more than just Nosferatu and Dracula, but to other horror films as well. You don't have to be paying attention that closely to notice the multiple references to The Exorcist.
I was hoping we'd mention
that,
especially in Lucy's scene.
Yeah, when we have Van Helsing, played here by Anthony Hopkins. Wonderfully by Sir Anthony Hopkins.
Chewing the scene almost as much as Gary Oldman, and I love it so much. He plays less of a vampire hunter and more of the mad scientist.
Yeah. Sir Anthony Hopkins is
this is right
Van Helsing.
After Silence of the Lamb, too.
Literally 2 years after. 2 years. No, a year after, excuse me. That's, yeah.
He was riding high on that Oscar when he's like, you know what? I'm going to do this vampire movie.
I'm just going to go crazy with it. And fortunately, Coppola gave Hopkins room to play around with the character to make him as kooky as possible.
I love it.
So, like, at one point, there's a scene that smells Lucy, I believe. To, like, he just gives her hair a whiff, and it's not in a seductive way. It's in the opposite. He's doing his job. He's seeing if he can detect Dracula's presence on her. But that was not, like, Coppola didn't tell him to do that. Like, that's just one of the moments where Anthony Hopkins just decided to do something, and it works. Like, it enriches the character of Van Helsing very much. And so we have the moment where Van Helsing shows up to the house, steps out of the carriage, and there's a street lamp.
Mm-hmm. I know, yep.
Very dense fog.
Very much like...
It's absolutely the moment when Father Merrin shows up to the McNeils in The Exorcist. When Van Helsing is trying to cast out the demon from Lucy after she has been bitten and seduced by Dracula.
Beautifully creepy, all white makeup and gown.
Oh, that gown is so gorgeous.
With the red blood that's dripping from her.
Yeah.
It's beautiful. This film
is beautiful. No matter, it's gorgeous.
Dripping with style.
Yeah. It's so...
We could have a whole episode just talking scene by scene.
Yeah.
Just how
beautiful.
Madly stylistic.
Yeah.
From the costumes to the sets, from the cinematography more than anything.
This is absolutely one of the films where it shows that Coppola learned painting from his father, and that he himself, like, dabbles in painting, that he has the eye of a painter, that he composes a shot as if this individual scene were the only thing that could tell you the story. Would it be able to? And I think with Coppola, more than like 99% of filmmakers, you could say that about that. Each individual frame is its own individual work of art. With Dracula, we get this meeting of the old and the new in so many different ways, not just with the storytelling and filmmaking, but with the cast. We have a star-studded cast. We have actors
we have Richard E. Grant,
Winona Ryder,
Cary Elwes,
Keanu Reeves,
who's, God bless him, he's doing his best.
He's trying.
He tried so hard.
Yeah. But Winona Ryder is really, as much in terms of whose show it really is, I think Winona Ryder really does give Gary Oldman a run for his money.
Especially toward like the latter half.
And Winona Ryder is the reason why the film was made in the first place.
She gave Coppola the script.
And what's funny is that she gave him the script because she was worried that he didn't like her.
Because she left
Godfather 3. Because she got sick and had to back out after being
told by her doctor, you got to go.
Yeah.
You have to go home.
After the role that was then recast with Sofia Coppola. So by the end of this meeting between Ryder and Coppola, he had agreed to do the script because Winona Ryder, having just recently done Edward Scissorhands, she'd done Beetlejuice a couple of years before, she wanted to break out of the role of the teenager, the little girl, the misunderstood, and into more mature roles.
What a mature role.
Yeah. And it really, it sets off a string of, oddly enough, like adaptations of classic texts that she would do for the next couple of years. So after Dracula, the following year, she does The Age of Innocence by Scorsese. And the year after that, she does Little Women, and then, by then she's more than the Winona Ryder we all know today. But as Mina Harker, she holds the film together in so many ways. She is neutral and delicate without being weak.
Curious.
Yeah, she's curious. And then when the facade of, I guess, Victorian
uptightness about sexuality and openness and
comes
expression.
Yeah, you know, when she embraces Dracula, by the time she embraces Dracula, so we have a Mina that's different from all of the other Minas and all the other Dracula movies, because this Mina Harker actually does things aside from being a victim, really. Whereas Jonathan Harker is the one who's kind of reduced to...
He doesn't do much.
Yeah.
He just fights for his life with all these sexy women chasing after him. That being said, this is a sexy movie.
There's a lot. You know, if vampirism is to be looked at as a metaphor for venereal disease and as a danger of why you shouldn't fuck around and find out, this movie absolutely speaks to the fear that so many people have about vampires being seductive, and also about sex during a time
where if you like even briefly mention it, it was like, what? Sex? Not in my society.
Also, when the film's coming out, it's at the height of the AIDS epidemic.
Yes.
You know, so there's something, I don't think that that's a coincidence that the film is coming out during a time when lustful embrace
was
and
scary.
Passion could result in you dying. The imagery is different from some of the other films, from what other films have tried to do to make AIDS a metaphor, but the uncontrollable loss of blood, the paleness of skin, the frailty of the body, like, these are things that it wouldn't be hard for an audience member in 1992 to look at and say that they've seen that before, or that they're experiencing that. And so you have the film working in so many levels, doing just what the text of Dracula has done since the 1890s. Like, you can't kill it. It's not going to die. It's always going to be relevant. Like, when it comes to something being more than just a classic, something being immortal, Coppola's adaptation is showing more of why that is. It's both timeless and it's very grounded in 1890s London or 1890s Eastern Europe. And the film, it's just wonderful. Like, it's something that should be appreciated more, or always, because we haven't gotten anything like Gary Oldman's Dracula ever. Like, a character who was sympathetic and not just an outright monster, or not just, a Halloween costume. I mean, I have here the name. The only thing I could think of for one of the forms that he's taken is after Mina writes Dracula the letter saying that she can't be with him and that she has to marry Jonathan. And he's crying, but he's also in the middle of shape shifting. And so I just have him down here as the crying shape, because he's not quite the beast form that attacks Lucy,
or the
in the garden
form,
or and there were multiple.
Yeah.
There's like the man bat, and then there's the old like bat.
Yeah.
Because the one instance that they see him in vampire bat form, he doesn't really have any fur on. It's like they caught him like kind of mid.
He's got like the wings.
Yeah.
But there's no
flap
to it.
And then later you see like an actual like vampire bat. That's such a great detail to show. Like, if you're not going to show the transformation in a way that like John Landis did with An American Werewolf in London, where you're going to see...
They didn't have the budget for that.
Yeah.
The agonizing hand growing.
Yeah. Like, if you're not going to see that, the next best thing is something, I guess, closer to...
Let the mind fill in the rest.
Yeah. Or like with Jeff Goldblum in The Fly, like, we see him in stages, but not necessarily moment by moment. But we know that he changes.
And that may either be with, he needs the blood
Yeah.
or just his mood.
Yeah. And so like the fact that you can see this character, this person who is in the process of changing into a giant bat, and he's just reading a letter because the woman that reminds him exactly of the wife he lost 400 years ago can't be with him.
He has crossed oceans of time to find her.
And he is crying. I compel anyone to try to find a moment where Dracula has been more of a tragic figure.
It's almost like Wolfman levels.
Yeah.
With that sort of like tragedy that I can't have this life. It's been taken from me.
By the time you get to the end where Mina, who has been turned by Dracula.
She was close. I don't think she was quite there yet.
Yeah, she's
on the cusp.
Close enough to where a communion
wafer
burned a permanent mark into her forehead to know that she has to be the one to kill him. Like it's emotional just thinking about it. But when he's in that robe and they're in
the chapel, the beginning of the film is.
Yeah. And the cross, the giant cross that he stabbed that started bleeding.
Pouring blood.
Because he felt that God betrayed him, because his wife killed herself because of the
misinformation.
Yeah, misinformation. His enemy that he was going to war with, they send a letter via arrow into the castle saying that Dracula is dead. And in agony, his wife
plummets
to her death.
I don't know who, moved the body to the church, but
someone did, because when he comes back and her body, it's still soaking. And in that moment, he commits the ultimate blasphemy against God and says God's dead to him. And in that moment, he becomes
vampire.
Yeah, the undead. To then return to that same scene.
Same broken cross.
Hundreds of years later. And now the body is reversed.
I know what you're talking about.
But also,
so it's like the curse is being.
Yeah. And so Mina has to kill him. When she stabs him and he's bleeding and the blood's covering the robe, and he accepts it. He doesn't fight her.
No.
He doesn't, I'm sure Van Helsing, Jonathan, any of the other guys, he would have absolutely put up a fight and would have taken all of them out.
They knew.
Yeah.
They knew what was going to happen.
But Mina's the one who has to do it. After the film was completed.
You want to talk about the alternate ending.
Yeah.
That the original ending that George Lucas of all people said like, listen, you might want to change it.
George Lucas, who we all know is infamous for changing things. But here's a moment where his input was spot on.
Mm-hmm.
Initially, Coppola had Mina killing Dracula just by stabbing him. Now, when he screened a version of this,
she not only stabs him, she flung herself into the arms of Jonathan Harker, and they run off into the sunset.
Yeah,
happy.
So George Lucas sees that, and he tells Francis, Francis, you broke one of your own rules.
You broke your rule.
And Francis is like, what? What do you like? You have to cut off the head. If you want to, Van Helsing explicitly states that if you want to kill a vampire,
to cut out the heart and cut off a head.
Yeah. You're going to need a wooden stake and something sharp. And Francis was like, shit, you're right.
And people just didn't like the happy ending type thing.
You know that if the movie came out today, happy ending or not, the head would not have been cut off because that would leave room for a sequel.
Dracula's back, baby. We're going to do old Hammer Horror style. We're going to have 10 sequels.
Like
Peter Cushing, Christopher Lee getting older by the day.
And so we end up with this film that's not only just as much about film, and this is the theme of today's episode, that's just a damn good adaptation of the novel. And here's something that's always been a personal pet peeve of mine. I really, really despise the term faithful or the idea of being faithful to a text. I don't think that when it comes to adaptation, that fidelity needs to be the number one goal, because what if the source material is shit?
Some things just don't translate well.
Exactly.
To film, you have to do something.
You know,
Change a minor thing or something's completely different to make sure it's viable to a film audience or a television audience.
some things just don't work.
They just don't translate.
Yeah, and so when it comes to what is essential for Dracula to be a Dracula story, what was it about Dracula the novel that creeped people the fuck out? And that essentially made the novel this like 19th century version of Hostel, where foreigners are punished for entering into a land that they don't belong in and messing with it. Because that's what we see happen to Jonathan. We see him being punished for over a month because he's going out east
mainly
to do business.
Because he was just there.
Yeah. And
it is terrible.
It is. But
what bad luck.
You know, the novel makes very clear that foreigners are not welcome, mostly because, as Jonathan makes clear in his diaries, which Coppola takes pretty much verbatim throughout the film, is that he doesn't like Eastern Europeans.
Racist towards the Romanians.
He's looking at as during the late Victorian age, when we're seeing this rise of amateur exploration.
Just a bunch of we're here, it's ours now.
Yeah.
If you don't like it, you're going to die.
Or even, a less aggressive form, but equally as expansive. You have figures like Theodore Roosevelt, who went everywhere for the sake of learning, for the sake of seeing other cultures. And that's something that for people of means, it was very popular, and eventually in, another decade or two where you get the rise of a middle class, you get this idea of leisure activity, that people are able to travel, and not just like 30 minutes away, but now because ships are faster, certain medicines are coming out to where people aren't dying of, certain tropical diseases as much, that people are seeing more of the world, that they're not relying on novels as much as, or travel literature as much as they used to. And so one of the results is that people are going to these places and they're saying, you guys kind of do this pretty weird.
And almost like, you're doing it wrong.
Yeah.
This is how it's supposed to be done.
It's kind of hilarious that one of the things that Jonathan Harker criticizes Romanians for doing is using too much paprika.
Oh no.
Yeah. Yeah. Because it just like completely dominates the
taste.
Yeah. And like he mentions paprika multiple times. Stoker uses this. He uses Jonathan's disorientation in the East, with this also being the age of Orientalism, where people are just absolutely mad over anything dealing with Asiatic cultures.
Something to blame. They need a finger to the point. They're not going to point at themselves. What are you, stupid?
Yeah, exactly.
It's not my fault. It's their fault.
And so you have this obsession with cultures, with the customs of the Orient. And so you have this desire to be amongst something different and exotic. But at the same time, Jonathan Harker's not sleeping well. The food he's eating is kind of upsetting him. At one point, he describes what sounds like a kebab, and you would think he literally describes it as, in London, it would be cat's meat. Like, I think like food that you would give to a cat, but really it's just beef and onion and bell pepper with paprika, which sounds great.
Yeah. But he's like, oh, paprika.
Yeah, he's like, oh, the paprika. He was like, I drank, believe me, but the food, not so much.
What is this foreign thing? It's called flavor.
Flavor. Yeah, like, he says this, and again, I'm quoting from the novel, the women looked pretty except when you got near them.
And he said that in the film. Like, oh, come on. I'm sure you look pretty into people getting near you, Jonathan.
He has these comments, like, quoting again, "It seems to me that the further east you go, the more unpunctual are the trains. What ought they to be in China?" End quote. And it's like all of this, like, very much like, in London, we do it this way. Yeah. You don't do it that way.
Meaning you're wrong.
Exactly. There's no attempt to understand the culture that he's being literally welcomed
with
into.
Open arms, almost.
You know, and so you take this disorientation and you add to it all of the superstitions.
How this movie plays out with Jonathan, it's almost as if it's one of those comeuppance horror, like, you meddled with this, it's almost like a bad karma horror movie, like how certain horror movies are like, don't mess with nature, or bad things happen. It's almost like, hey, you invited this type of horror to happen because you disrespected it.
Yeah. You know, he doesn't take it seriously when all of the peasants tell him to wear a crucifix or to ward himself clear of the, you know, the evil eye. You know, they warn him about going to Dracula's castle to begin with.
That looks like someone on a throne.
Yeah.
This is beautiful.
And he doesn't heed their warnings. And so, yeah, it's absolutely a comeuppance. When he goes to the bedroom where Dracula's brides are, and he's essentially drained of his youth, amongst other things, for about a month, it's because he goes into a room that he wasn't supposed to go into.
Dracula told him, hey, this castle's falling apart.
Yeah. Don't go. Dracula says, he says it in the novel. He says that both Dracula and Jonathan comment on the fact that most of the rooms in the castle have been bolted shut. But Jonathan finds one that's just closed kind of tightly, and he opens it, and that's one where he finds the brides. It's a moment of, you're somewhere else. You're a stranger in a strange land.
You don't know what you're messing with.
You heed to the customs.
It's almost like, almost a precursor to what sort of stories Lovecraft would end up writing.
Yeah. Like you as someone who doesn't belong here, the more you don't pay attention and follow directions when you have no sense of bearing, bad things are going to happen to you.
And it's your fault.
Yeah.
We told you. We warned you. Yeah. Did you not hear what I said? The place is falling apart. You're going to get hurt.
The fact that Jonathan is bold enough to enter into someone's house as a guest and then explore during times of the night that he's not supposed to, or times of the day when he's not supposed to. His punishment, while it might seem severe, he is going into someone else's home. He is in someone else's land. For him not to be respectful of these customs.
Some places and customs, culture takes that very seriously.
Very. And I wanted to, speaking of this, and I guess then we can transition, because I think this is a perfect crossover.
I do, but I just wanted to touch on just a few little quick things.
Oh, absolutely. I want to talk about the shaving scene.
Possibly the only slightly homoerotic scene based off a book that's very,
very
homoerotic.
Very much so. I think it's important, you know, first impressions make a difference. So I just wanted to briefly mention a couple of firsts with Dracula in the book in relation to how you see these firsts in the film. So the very first appearance of Dracula in the novel has Bram Stoker writing, "Within stood a tall old man, clean shaven, save for a long white mustache, and clad in black from head to foot, without a single speck of color about him anywhere." So we have that first appearance. Now in the film, obviously, Coppola changes that. There's no mustache. He does keep the hairy palms that are later described in the book, which are absolutely disturbing.
It's red.
It's red, which appears
long red,
which on film looks so much better.
Beautiful.
This long,
it's almost like Technicolor.
Yeah, this long blood red kimono contrasted against the palest of skin and pale hair.
Long pale hair.
You know, the details that you find in both the long filed fingernails.
Mm-hmm. The eeriness of the shadow
moving
on its own, which I feel very much harkens back to the original Nosferatu.
Exactly.
With the lumbering shadow going up.
It's the same shadow. Like Coppola, that is no accident.
Even
it's there.
Mixed with beautifully chilling sound design.
Yeah.
Of like screams and breathy moans.
Yeah.
And like it's
the castle's a character.
Yes.
Yeah. And of course, Bram Stoker wonderfully establishes the mythos of vampirism right off the bat.
It's kind of all over the place.
Yeah. Whether we have an explanation for it or not, it's at least established. Like, you know, I'd rather someone tell me that there's a rule than have to tell me why the rule is, as long as the rule's consistent.
Yeah.
Because then, like, I mean, I don't care. Like, if you tell me that a vampire can never enter your house unless you invite them, fine. I don't need to know why. It's odd, sure. But as long as you follow it every single time, cool. Dracula's first words to Harker when he opens the door, of course, is, "Welcome to my house.
I am Dracula."
Yes. Enter freely and of your own will. You know? So you have like that, and then this is absolutely beautiful. The first time he touches Jonathan, Jonathan says his hand grasped mine with a strength which made me wince, an effect which was not lessened by the fact that it seemed as cold as ice, more like the hand of a dead than a living man.
I might have to put you on a technicality there, because wouldn't the first time be when he's the coach driver?
That's so. What's really interesting, that little detail is perfect.
You wouldn't even know.
Yeah, because Jonathan, shortly after, says that the last time, or the only time, that he's felt such a powerful grip was the coach driver. And he says he would have mistaken Dracula, or this figure, for the coach driver if it weren't for the fact that the coach driver just dropped him off. And so here you have Stoker beautifully playing with Harker's sense of reality, that he's so disoriented. He's second guessing whether the person standing in front of him is just the person who dropped him off. And then you have the shaving scene toying with what it is that Jonathan's actually seeing.
Yeah. Because you have the shot of Dracula's hand slowly reaching and touching, never seeing him in the reflection.
No.
But you can see the hand grabbing him, Harker whipping around, Dracula's on the other side of the room.
Yeah. That scene that Coppola films, Stoker writes, "This time there could be no error, for the man was close to me, and I could see him over my shoulder, but there was no reflection of him in the mirror." And then he gets cut while shaving, and the blood starts to trickle down his chin. And Jonathan continues, "When the Count saw my face, his eyes blazed with a sort of demonic fury, and he suddenly made a grab at my throat. In film, it's the shadow. I drew away, and his hand touched the string of beads which held the crucifix. It made an instant change in him, for the fury passed so quickly that I could hardly believe that it was ever there." And here we have many of the vampire rules established. More importantly, the mirror. It's one thing to read that, but this is a moment that seeing it absolutely takes the cake. You see over shoulder Gary Oldman, you see hand, you see Keanu Reeves, and you see the mirror.
Nothing.
But there is nothing except Keanu Reeves shaving. And yet, you know Gary Oldman should be in that reflection.
Do you know the reason why vampires probably are not seen in the reflection?
No, that's actually...
Because back in the day when mirrors were made, silver.
Oh, that makes perfect sense.
Probably vampires today could probably see the reflection just fine.
Because mirrors, they would never waste silver on a mirror.
No.
Yeah.
That's why mirrors are almost like a luxury item. Even like before then.
Because of the vampires.
Yeah, and you had to use silver. Was it expensive commodity?
Yeah. In this economy, I mean, yeah.
You think I can afford silver?
That makes perfect sense. I don't know what it is about silver.
Garlic.
Silver with werewolves.
It's just
like
you said, you don't need an explanation.
Yeah.
Why can
Yeah.
Batman? why can Batman, Dracula Batman, turn the fog and control weather? How can he turn into a bundle of rats? It doesn't matter.
And so, okay, there were a couple of things that you wanted to.
Yes, we had mentioned it earlier,
Yeah.
but we didn't talk more about it. Is the Exorcism
homages,
because we talked about it with the silhouette.
Yeah.
We briefly talked about it with Lucy's scene in the white.
Yeah.
With Van Helsing holding a cross.
Yep.
And almost channeling Father Maris in this biblically large chant of the power of Christ compels. You didn't say that, but it's in that same
it's in the
vein.
same motion.
And the beautiful reversed footage. Did you catch that?
Yeah, when of her scuttling back into her
creepy,
to her
so
crypt.
smooth. I had to rewind. I'm like, did they reverse it? Because there's something about that so smooth and unnatural.
It makes it even more uncanny.
But then you have the next scene right after that where she pops up and
the blood. Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, it really, again, not just giving homage to The Exorcist, but for Coppola to pay homage to a friend of his, that William Friedkin, being a director who came up at the same time that he did.
That new age Hollywood.
And that both of them are releasing some of their best work at the same time, that they're going, they're talking about each other's work, that like The Exorcist comes out a year after The Godfather, but The Godfather comes out a year after The French Connection. It's like,
it's like a love dance.
Yeah. Like, they're doing all of this. And so for Coppola to do his first horror film,
very gothically horror.
I think it's very beautiful and also telling to show the influence of The Exorcist, that his first foray into horror would send tribute to what is
beginning of a new era of horror.
Yeah. And I think it's really, and it's so appropriate that you have the same visual imagery going on.
There's a lot of Catholicism in this film.
Yeah.
It's it's almost like Italian Catholic, that really old sort of Catholics, very much with the wedding of Mina Jonathan with like the crowns. It's a very,
which is really interesting because Jonathan in the novel is very, not just him, but Londoners in general are
Protestant,
depicted even, I was going to say worse, but I mean like even like further away from God.
Francis Ford Coppola comes from an Italian family. He's probably very heavily Catholic.
Yeah. So that's what I was going to say, is that like Coppola's influence shows through more early in the novel when one of the peasants goes to give him a crucifix. He's like, I don't need this.
You
like, yeah, what are you, stupid?
Why would I get out of here?
Yeah. So I think it's interesting that the film, again, showing religion, just like The Exorcist, being an answer when something like medicine isn't. To think of when the doctors go to investigate, to check up on Lucy, and
Dr. Seward,
who's also one of Lucy's suitors, that they can't figure out. They're like, oh, there's bile in her urine, like that's, and when she's clearly losing blood because she hasn't fed, and so she's like wasting away, and so they give her a double transfusion.
That almost doesn't work.
It's amazing. If she weren't a vampire, she would have died. Like I'm not a doctor, but like
you can't have that much blood in the.
That's a lot. Two like grown young men pumping blood. Also, a very unsettling part of the movie for me. I don't deal well
with needles
or blood at all. Like I can't do it.
Fascinating.
Yeah. So that was
that scene where the room was engulfed in blood. You were like, ooh.
Like that, because that's more
comical, not like over the top.
It's over the top. Whereas like the arteriogram in The Exorcist, that I will forever, like I've seen it once.
Yeah, you had mentioned that last time.
15 years ago with my eyes open. And since then, eyes closed.
Mom, tell me when it's over.
Yeah, like, please. So all of that really brings us, like all of this makes perfect sense. That the reason that the other movie that we would be talking about today would be Frankenhooker.
Another sexy movie.
Very sexy. Very sexy.
Maybe not in the way Dracula was.
Yeah.
Because Dracula's like, whoo, collar tugging, like, whoo.
Yeah.
This is more like sleazy, but not too sleazy.
Yeah. Whereas Bram Stoker's Dracula goes for lush and for the rich color, for these pretty lavish
Almost like an Argento film.
Yeah, like everything is very sensual. The world of Frankenhooker is the opposite of sensual. It's the kind of sensual that you accidentally order in a hotel room, like on pay-per-view, and when you're a kid and you get in trouble because you can't hide it.
Yeah.
And then it's like, why is there $19.99 worth of porn on the hotel bill?
Who watched Dracula and the act part has 3 X's in it?
Yeah. And it's like, why?
Let's start from the beginning.
So Frank Henenlotter, who directed Frankenhooker.
He also directed
The Basket Case trilogy and Brain Damage as well. So you've got Frank Henenlotter, whose movies are typically seen as being like,
B-movies.
Yeah, B-movies.
But I have to say, higher quality B-movies
than some. Yeah, exactly. The most important thing to discuss with Frankenhooker is its star and the oddity of her career. So Patty Mullen in 1986 was Penthouse's Pet of the Month. In 1987, she does this B horror film called Doom Asylum. In 1988, she's the Penthouse Pet of the Year.
Again?
Well, first it was the month. Now it's of the year. Yeah, now they're like, Patty Mullen is pretty choice. 1989, she does an episode of The Equalizer. And in 1990...
of all things.
Yeah, one episode, a single episode. And then in 1990, she does Frankenhooker. She has done nothing since then. In an interview, which is on one of the Frankenhooker like DVD special features, she said that the reason why is because she had a family. Huh. She had a kid not long after Frankenhooker, which is really sad.
She does a pretty good job.
Because I think she's fucking fantastic.
Yeah, I mean, when she's not Frankenhooker, when she's playing Elizabeth Shelley, which is great. Yes, very on the nose of Mary Shelley. She's a bit stilted, a slightly bit wooden, but when she's Frankenhooker, she goes all out. Like with her facial expressions, the tics, and like how she's almost robotically, but not robotically, bearing out the lines that the other hookers had said.
Want a date?
Yeah. Got money?
And like honestly, like the closest that anyone has gotten to the performance that Patty Mullen delivers in this, honestly, and I'm saying this absolutely lovingly because I fucking love her too, is Margot Robbie as Harley Quinn.
Oh, yeah. Yes.
Like
100%.
It's like it's there. And
it's with the mouth.
It's all the face. It's like the ability.
The rubberiness of the facial.
Like yes, exactly. She has an elasticity that few actors know how to do with their body. That it's so rare to find someone who can tell you so much by just moving a little part of themselves in rapid succession.
Which is interesting because you don't like Jim Carrey, and he does the exact same thing.
Yeah, Jim Carrey, he's something else. But
besides that.
But yes, no, you're absolutely right. Like, no one can take away that from him. Assuming that not everyone has seen Frankenhooker, though you should.
It's a blast. Literally and metaphorically.
The movie is a goddamn masterpiece, and I'm not even saying that lightly.
It's a B-movie. It's silly. It's kind of stupid. But it's competently really well done.
It's great, yeah. Like, it's clear that everyone knew what they were making.
Yes.
And they made it.
And it wasn't a thing where they were like, we're going to make it intentionally bad.
Yeah.
They knew how to make it properly.
To tell the story.
Sam Raimi would give it a chef's kiss because he's the master of really good, high-quality B-movie.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, thank you. It's an A-B movie. Our two main characters, there's Jeffrey Franken.
Whoever the actor who plays Jeffrey Franken,
James Lorenz.
I love him so much.
Oh, he was great.
There's something about him that he's like
a Brad Dourif type, or like
I would almost he's like a poor man's Marty McFly in a way.
Yeah,
it's just the New York accent and the fact that he's kind of prunish.
Yeah,
that scene where the hookers are taking the super crack. He's like, no, don't do that. Like, no, not the music. No, that's the devil's music.
Yeah.
You can't do that. That's not natural. It was so funny to me.
He does a great job.
He has this weird charisma about him.
Yeah.
Even though he's like a loser.
Yeah. So Jeffrey Franken is engaged to Elizabeth Shelley.
Who's apparently fat.
They put a fat suit
I couldn't tell.
on Hattie Mullen.
They made her hips big. That's it.
Yeah.
You couldn't. She wasn't.
Yeah.
They just patted out the hips. That's it.
Exactly.
And she's quote, quote, fat.
Yeah.
Which is very important.
For what we're going to get into.
Yes.
So, and also her name is doubly important. The Shelley.
Mm-hmm. Mary Shelley.
Yes, giving
homage to the author of Frankenstein or the modern day Prometheus.
And then the first name, Elizabeth. Elizabeth, of course, is Victor Frankenstein's fiance in the novel.
I wonder where Jeffrey comes from.
Yeah, Jeffrey's just kind of like...
Jeffrey's there.
Jeffrey receives an automated lawnmower.
I think didn't he build it? I thought he built it.
He built it as a gift.
Yes.
Yeah, he built it as a gift, not that he received it.
Papa.
And while demonstrating it during the barbecue, the lawnmower goes berserk and runs over Elizabeth.
That's the opening.
Like, this is literally how the movie begins.
Before the credits, I think.
Yeah.
Or it's after. I don't remember.
It's like super early.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's the beginning of the film.
Yep.
This is how you're introduced to this world.
This world is
gruesome.
Bleak.
Yeah.
Gruesome.
Especially for women.
Yes. It's like, this almost feels like a spiritual successor to the world of RoboCop.
Yeah.
Because it's it uses satire to drive its point across.
Yeah. To get at this idea that the human body, because of the rapid rise of technology in our lives, is becoming something different. That this is what, the whole academic field of transhumanism, of like going beyond the human form now.
This is like during the early cusp of the internet.
Yeah.
And like we're only a few years of like a limited knowledge in our homes.
Yeah.
And things like that. And
shit's happening quickly.
Yeah. And almost early stages of artificial intelligence with these computers. And
so in this world, Jeffrey, who is also a dropout of
medical school,
because he's into bioelectricity.
Yep. He dropped out of medical school and he's now an electrician.
So he's putting these two things together.
Maybe not the best way.
And he also doesn't put things together the best way throughout the entire film, because he's absolutely heartbroken. Because he is absolutely devastated. I mean, he just watched his fiance get mutilated.
I forget what the wonderfully horrendous newscast had described it.
Oh God,
like a gore salad or something.
Yeah,
man, that's I would not.
Bad.
I would not watch that news.
He comes up with the decision to try to put her back together because he kept the parts.
Electricity. He has like anatomy like poster of the woman form. He's got like he drew on it like an electric like
a grid system.
Yeah.
The problem is that the lawnmower ruined most of.
There's not much left.
Elizabeth's body.
Get the head, a foot, a boob.
Yeah.
You don't get much.
So he's got to get him somewhere. And Jeffrey then has the idea, in his moment of despair, that he's going to harvest these parts from other women.
Tell the audience how he comes to what he does to come to that conclusion. What he does to himself.
Oh, he
lobotomizes himself with a drill.
Yes. You can't see it, but I'm pointing to my head because I struggled to form the words with my mouth. But the image of him, he realizes that he could tap into a certain part of his brain.
Like unlock something. Like make him think better.
By drilling into it.
Not like he's in pain.
Yeah,
he winces.
Just like,
there's like no gore, just zzz.
Yeah.
And he's like, oh yeah, okay, I'm thinking of, I'm gonna do that.
And so then he comes up with this super crack.
No. That's after.
That is after, excuse me. Yeah.
He decides that the best way to rebuild his dead girlfriend, to make her perfect, the perfect woman form.
The perfect woman.
What is important and what matters is he's going to go where all the most beautiful women are, the downtrodden streets of downtown New York City.
Jeffrey goes to Times Square. For today's audience, Times Square is the place where you see people dressed up as Spider-Man.
You see all the ads?
You see large neon advertisements. You see stores and restaurants.
Broadway
Shows. You see all of this being advertised. 30 years ago, Times Square was a place where you would find heroin and
prostitute.
And all of the prostitutes you'd want.
You would avoid Times Square like your life depended on it.
Which it did, because the crime rate in New York City in the 80s was terrible.
It was obscene.
Like, it's ridiculous. And like, we're not even talking just like petty crime. We're talking about murder. Like
shootings,
murder,
muggings,
rape, muggings, all of these things. New York City was not the place to be from the late 70s throughout the 80s. And it wasn't until Rudolph Giuliani, yes, that Rudolph Giuliani, became mayor, decided to clean up not just the city, but Times Square in particular. He cracked down
on the crack.
Because, again, the 80s, not a great time when it comes to drugs, unless you were a dealer, because the crack epidemic was absolutely
out of control,
wiping out communities of color throughout the country, especially in cities like New York City. And so you see this world. You see this world of pimps and sex workers and Johns and drug dealers and users and addicts. You see the seedy underground that's not underground, it's 42nd Street.
In the open.
And you see this in Frankenhooker. And Jeffrey, while observing the ongoings of this world, ends up meeting a pimp named Zorro.
He's a big man.
He's a big guy. He's a big one. And he meets these very lovely women who happen to be prostitutes. So he decides that they're the ones.
Not them, but
they're parts of their body.
Yes.
And not every part, of course. Like, you don't need 8 arms. No. Well, we're not building Octohooker here. We just need a couple of pieces.
The most perfect.
To make the perfect one. And so Jeffrey has the idea of getting a party that he's going to invite these select prostitutes, which he then plans on killing them. With super crack.
That will explode a guinea pig.
Yeah. And so he brings them all to a hotel room. He's observing them, and he's seeing
dressed
which
as
parts.
A doctor doing measurements and like, I don't know about that. That one's pretty good. Yeah, that one's good. I like that one.
And so and he's drawing numbers on them.
Doing check marks on the butt.
Yeah.
That's what the one I want.
But then, because these girls are getting restless,
we have to leave. And if Zorro's coming, we have to leave. You haven't
paid us.
Yeah. What happens was he starts getting second thoughts about this whole thing. Like, I can't go through with this. I can't do this to these girls. The show's off. And like, they start like, hey, where's our money? They're getting restless. Like, you're supposed to pay us. And then they discover the
stash,
the super crack, and they go ballistic for it because they've never seen. They're like giant rocks of it. They're
giant crack rocks.
They go crazy.
The girls take the crack,
have a party of their own,
and then
a very not sexy party.
Yeah. What happens is what exactly you expected. They explode.
Beautifully edited. Like, they are certain pose, and then it's on a seamless transition to like fake, almost mannequin models of them filled with like explosives and like fireworks. It's like very well done
for the budget.
$1.5 million budget they had.
Yeah. Jeffrey takes all of these just
garbage bags,
this random assortment of body parts. And he takes them back to his basement in his mom's house.
No one stops him.
Yeah.
The trunk's open full of body parts.
Which says a lot about New York City in 1990. Mm-hmm. And he takes them back and he starts to reassemble these parts.
He puts the remaining parts in his estrogen bath in the freezer, promising that he will fix them.
Yeah.
Later. He's very adamant about that. Hold on, ladies. I'm going to fix you. I got to fix Elizabeth first.
Yes. And so he puts Elizabeth back together. And after he reattaches her head, she kind of short circuits because
after he's waiting for the big storm. The big storm happens. He pulls the lever, the lightning, and when she comes back down, she's standing. She's alive, and she's not right. Like you said, short circuit.
she ticks. You can see in Patty Mullen's facial expressions that there is something like trying to start an ignition and it's just not cranking, but you can hear it trying to crank.
Yep.
And she reverts
To all of the
girls
of the hookers. Want a date? Want some money?
Yeah.
Got money?
She starts saying all of these things that the prostitutes would say, even though it's Elizabeth's head, there's all of that muscle memory.
Yeah.
That the body still remembers all of these things. And so Elizabeth, in this moment, is more of the other girls than she is herself. And so she goes back to Times Square.
Because that's what she knows.
Yeah. She
Shuffling.
and she's like the best impression that someone could do of Boris Karloff and those giant boots.
And she had the giant
she's got the
boots with the platforms on them.
And she makes her way back to Times Square and she tries to pick up John's. And there's something to be said that a woman who was literally torn to pieces,
recreated solely for the pleasure of another man.
Literally, she has no other choice but to go back. So it shows the harsher end of the cycle of sex work in terms of expressing the dangers of it. We get an Elizabeth who's trying to be herself, which in this moment is to be these other girls. Yep. And then finally, Jeffrey's able to get through to her.
Before we have a escapade of her getting with other men only for them to explode violently.
Yeah, because she's got the
juice,
the
electricity.
All the electricity in them, so they explode.
And because he's like walking about, Zorro picks up because he hears this Frankenhooker.
Yeah,
he's looking for his girls. Where's my girls? And he's like, that ain't my girl. Something's up. So Jeffrey finds her, somehow corrals her back into Ma shed. Surprisingly, has not heard anything.
When Elizabeth comes to,
using the classic electric bolts, she just needs a good old zap.
Yeah, to get her back into,
and she's back into
form,
Elizabeth form.
Yeah, the moment that she realizes, I don't know which moment is more powerful. The moment that she realizes that her body is not her own, or that she realizes what Jeffrey had to do in order to make her body.
Because at first she was like, you brought me back. This is incredible. Yeah. People are going to hear about this. And since he stops and realizes, wait, this isn't my arm.
All of these girls had to die.
This isn't my legs. These are what happened, Jeffrey.
Yeah. And she freaks out, as anyone would. I mean, to not only have you just been revived from the dead, but you find out that your fiance killed like 5 women, and
to create a body that he would love, but
that it's not yours, it's the perfect body, but it's not your body.
This isn't the body.
It's like these aren't your legs weren't this long before. Like you didn't have, your breasts weren't like that. Like all of these things. It's another realization of, so this is what he wanted all along, but this wasn't me. So how much of me being back is really me? Or is for me, or am I just alive so I can please him? And as all of this is happening in Elizabeth's mind, Zorro has tracked them back to the basement and goes to chop off Jeffrey's head, which he does.
Surprisingly, she didn't see him coming.
Yeah. And he chops off his head, but he's not done yet. Jeffrey, that is. Because Elizabeth...
Nope. Something else.
The body parts.
This is probably the most nail on the coffin,
yeah, how could
about this? When the lightning strikes and it revives Elizabeth, it also strikes
the estrogen tank.
The estrogen tank that is a
full
freezer.
Of the parts.
And the parts come alive, but the thing dumps over.
They still have the memory.
Yes, the thing dumps over when Zorro comes, and it's this horrid amalgamation of legs and arms and mouth and breast, and it's horrible and disgusting and disturbing, and it's the personification of objectification of women, because all you see is mouths, breasts, and legs, which is, me being facetious, is the most quote important part of a woman. And they take Zorro and they
drag him
into the knocked over freezer to do, who knows, he has crack.
Yeah,
they have a good time, I guess.
He drowns in it.
No, it got dumped. It's empty. I don't know what they're doing.
Something. They do something to
I don't
him.
want to know.
Yeah. Whatever happens to Zorro, it's not pretty, but it's definitely his comeuppance.
Yep.
And so
Jeffrey gets his own comeuppance.
Yes, because Elizabeth takes this head and wants to bring him back because she's a good girlfriend. She's a good fiance.
Mm-hmm.
But she doesn't have the body parts of a man.
And Jeffrey said, the estrogen formula to bring people back only works on women. What is she going to do?
I guess she's maybe going to use those body parts from the prostitutes to give Jeffrey a new body. That's what she does.
And she's like, oh, it was the only way.
It was the only way to do it. And so when Jeffrey wakes up and he has a woman's body and he's freaking out.
How do you think, Jeffrey, she felt?
Exactly. Because here we have the moment where Jeffrey's reaction says that it's okay.
It's fine for you to do it.
For you to
create
yeah,
this perfect human woman body. But no, it's not okay when it happens to you because you're a man. Right?
Exactly. It's okay for a woman to have a body that is desired, but it's not okay for a man to have that same body.
Yep.
That the body, that a woman's body has the value as long as it's on the pedestal, but it's somehow inferior as soon as it's possessed by oneself. And then it ends.
With him screaming.
Yeah.
But honestly, Jeffrey, if I was in your situation,
be glad that you're alive.
I was like, oh, okay. I have a woman's.
You have a woman's body.
I can move.
Yeah.
I can still do things. I'm just
gonna. The fact that your fiance is smart enough to put you back together after you just died.
I could probably still wear my same wardrobe, which is maybe a bit baggy, maybe a bit tight in some places. But you know what? I'm alive.
Exactly. It's in all of these ways that Frankenhooker is doing so much more than I guarantee anyone is guessing when they hear the title of the movie. And I have to say that I myself was part of this, not even skeptical audience, but just a cheesy, campy B horror film.
Which it is.
Right. But it's brilliant.
There's merit to it.
It's doing everything that Mary Shelley wanted, what I would imagine she wanted her novel to do. And I think it also goes to show.
Would you please explain what she wanted to do, just so we have clarification?
Yeah. I think with her novel, obviously there's the whole, you can only fuck with science so much before it fucks with you back. But I think also that for her as a woman, as a young woman, I mean, she's 18 when she comes up with it, when she writes this, that her role in her immediate community of her husband, Percy, of Lord Byron, of other early romantics, her role could only go so far.
She can only progress so much.
At one point, Percy tried to get her to sleep with one of his best friends just because he could, just to test her. Her role was never taken as seriously as the other men in the group. I think for Mary to know what it's like to feel like just a body of parts that are used, for her to create the story of Frankenstein,
where a creature discovers he's more than just these
body parts.
It's more than what his creator has made. He's a living, breathing thing with its own consciousness, free will, and soul. And
and I think this is the reason why, as it's been imparted to me, why so many women relate and enjoy the novel of Frankenstein, because it's speaking to this feeling of objectification. It's this very sensitive portrayal of wanting to create something and having it taken from you, having it bastardized, having it destroyed. It's this feeling that for Mary Shelley as a woman in the early 19th century, that her work would only be considered so much, and that she would be defined in part by her husband or her friends or her husband's friends. And that struggle is part of what makes the novel and adaptations that are done well so powerful. I mean, for anyone, especially for anyone, definitely, but especially, I would imagine for women who are looking at this text as an example of
early feminine structure. based on like a book that's heavily revolved around men.
Yeah, but I think, like having Mary Shelley being the daughter of Wollstonecraft Shelley, who wrote on the vindication of women's rights, being one of the foundational feminist texts, but she died while giving birth to Mary.
Yeah.
That's one of the theories of Mary writing the novel, that it was this struggle to want to create but not being able to create, or what happens when your creation is the thing that kills you. And so what Frankenhooker does is it takes all of this and it puts it into this world that is so real. And
real in a vaguely over-the-top way, but still grounded in reality, because it like talks with the ideas of women objectification, crack epidemic. They're portrayed in this wacky, cartoony way, but it was still happening at the time. For women objectification, it's still happening.
Exactly. Just like we were talking about with The Exorcist, or what we're going to talk about with most of these movies, is that, they might be doing one thing on the surface, but it's only to pull you in and to get you to realize that what they're actually doing underneath is the most important thing.
And it's more interesting that we compared these two films, because they do with sex and sexuality in its own way. One based off of an era where you didn't talk about sex. It was very rigid. Compare that to the 90s, where it was fine for prostitutes to be out and about doing these very overt and explicit things, and for like you and your significant other one to do these things, but that rigidness about it still.
Yeah, there's the taboo of sexuality is still very much alive, even though Frankenhooker is 100 years after the events of Dracula. Like it's still, not only is it still there, but like women are still being punished for it. Mm-hmm. The idea of female pleasure is still seen as sinful.
And especially during this time in like television, parents are like, I don't mind my child seeing gratuitous violence on the screen, but heaven forbid my child sees something alluring or seductive or nudity. Like, that cannot happen.
That it's the problem most would have with both of these films is not the fact that people are ripped apart or killed or brutally murdered, but the fact that there's sex.
And nudity.
Yeah.
And like women saying and acting in these disgusting, vulgar ways that a woman should not act and say.
Exactly. I think it's a pairing that, not only given the obvious connection of these being adaptations of two classic literary monsters, the fact that both of them come out within 2 years of each other.
The fact that, despite budget limits, have their own unique style.
A style that they do, that they show extremely well. And I think because of that, these two are perfect. They're a perfect match for one another.
You could easily argue that, the Kenneth Branagh Frankenstein and Dracula, Francis Ford Coppola Dracula, are a good match. But I don't think, if I remember, Branagh plays it straight more like a drama film than a piece of, dare I say, art.
Yeah.
Which isn't to say Kenneth Branagh isn't a good film. It's the fact that he doesn't take the opportunity and liberties to make something unique.
Yeah, there's only one Frankenhooker.
Yeah.
There's nothing that compares to it in so many different ways. I guess hopefully our listeners are not sick and tired of vampires.
Yes.
Because next week,
if you thought these two films gave you a visceral reaction, I hope you're not sick of blood and teeth sinking, because we're doubling down on the vampires.
So next week, we are going to pair The Lost Boys,
the Joel Schumacher Lost Boys,
with A Return to Salem's Lot
by our good old friend
Larry Cohen.
Maybe there will be a space Jesus in this one.
I really hope so. Or like a vampire Jesus.
Oh, that'd be great.
Take this blood, drink it. But not too much, because I also need it.
My blood is the life force.
Yes.
That's too much. You can stop now.
Please, you are killing me. You are taking too much blood. So that's what we have next week for you folks. Thank you for tuning in. Please make sure to listen, subscribe, whatever you need to do, legally or illegally.
You can find us on Visual Reactions on Facebook.
So check us out, and thank you for joining us.